All right, welcome to the Quantum Leap, taking quantum from the research lab to the industries and security. I'm Scott Likens with PwC. I'm our Chief AI Engineer, and in part-time I lead our research and development in all emerging technologies, and quantum's been a passion of mine and my team's for a while. So instead of going to the panel, I want to ask a bold audience member who wants to explain quantum mechanics in 1 minute or less. And what is a qubit and why does it matter? Any takers? Joe? No. Not 1 minute? Okay. All right. Well, luckily, we have an amazing panel here today. So I'm joined by Theo, the CEO of Alice and Bob, a quantum computing company. We're actually joined with Alice of Alice and Bob, who's a quantum algorithm scientist. And we're also joined by Joseph, the head of quantum computation at EDF, which I hear is a very large company providing electricity. Just is amazing. So I wanted to start out a quick intro, you know, what you do, Alice and Bob, but individually, your vision for quantum, and of course EDF, and start out with why you think it's so important that we're talking about it here today. What's different now than even 2 or 5 years ago, of course? Theo?
Yeah, thanks Scott for having us and PwC for hosting that. So at Alice and Bob, we're a hardware company. We're here to build a quantum computer. We do so using some chips that we cool down at very low temperature. And our secret sauce is to have designed a quantum bit, the basic block of the quantum computer, that is extremely robust and survives the noise, has some error correction built in within the design, which simplifies dramatically the design of the whole computer. So we're racing with some significant competitors, but with a strong technological angle, followed suit by players like AWS. Just to give you a rough ID card of Alice and Bob, we're about 140, something like that. We're mostly based in Paris, just a couple of blocks down the street in Ballard. We have an office in Boston, and we just raised 100 million euros to build an even much larger lab in the north of Paris in the next 6 or 9 months. Yeah, so that's us, Alice and Bob, in a nutshell. Myself, I'm the CEO and co-founder. I'm a physicist by training. Studied at École Polytechnique. I did my PhD at the École Normale Supérieure on the kind of technology we're using today. And my role in the company, I guess, is to provide the vision and the resources to execute it. Our vision is to deliver those extremely exciting machines that are going to completely change the way we address certain kind of problem. And Alice will tell us all about what kind of problem we can address with those machines, and to make sure we provide Europe and the world with the most powerful machines out there.
And later I'm going to ask you to explain cat qubits. We'll come back to that. Alice.
Yeah, thanks Scott, thanks Theo. So indeed you said we're building an amazing technology with a great team of people, and the next question is like, what are we actually going to be able to do with this technology? And that's exactly my role as Alice and Bob, as a quantum algorithm scientist. So we expect to have, for certain type of problems, a huge advantage compared to classical computation, but it's not completely straightforward and clear how you bridge the gap between a research lab and the use case that you will have at EDF, for instance, corresponding optimization and those kind of things. And so we really have a research team dedicated to those first applications. So when we say first applications, like 100 qubits, and what can we do with it, what's possible to do, how can we beat classical algorithms. And it's actually a hard research problem because classical computing has been around for like 60, 80 years, so we have a lot of nice, brilliant ideas, and quantum computing is new, and quantum mechanics is complicated. It's a whole new way of looking at the world, so we have to design to really rethink how we solve algorithmic problems with this machine. So we're targeting we're going to talk more about it, but material design and quantum chemistry as those first applications that we're going to tackle with 100,000 logical qubits. Thanks.
Joseph.
Thanks for the invitation. So I'm working at EDF, which is building an amazing technology, which is electricity. So we provide electricity for a large part of Europe. We have 56 nuclear power plants. So we started our journey in quantum 2018, actually, and we have now one of the biggest end-user team involved in this technology. Our job is not to develop a quantum computer, but instead developing quantum usages. So we see quantum almost everywhere in our business, from the left, from production, how do you output electrons, to distribution, how to you commercialize energy, and in between you have an application in the networks, how to drive electrons from a zone to another. So of course it's a long-term technology, but it's not only a matter of qubit, and so it's not only a matter of computing, it's also a matter of software, and that's why you put such an effort.
So I want to start out with the question, the first question everyone always asks me is, when is Q-Day? When is quantum here? And it's, I think, a little bit of an unanswerable question, but I think you have a perspective, and I saw your roadmap. Can you talk to us about Gen 1 to Gen 2, noisy versus not as noisy? And maybe that's where cat qubits come in, but give us your perspective on, where are we truly at in this journey?
Yeah, the first thing is that quantum computers are around. The thing is they're not yet more powerful than your smartphone, typically. So the Q-Day people have in mind is, when will we be able to use that quantum computer to do things that are absolutely unfeasible with the largest classical supercomputers out there. And indeed, the reason why those first quantum computers are not yet delivering the full promises of that exponential increase in computing power is because of noise, of errors. And just to give the audience an intuition on why that's so, I often say that building a quantum computer in itself is a paradox. Because on one hand, you want a machine to behave quantum mechanically, and for that, it has to be perfectly isolated from the rest of the world. I mean, you, myself, we do not teleport. We're not in several places at once, because we live in a noisy classical world. And so for nature to exhibit the interesting properties of quantum mechanics, intrication, entanglement, superposition, those kind of things, it has to be perfectly isolated. But at the same time, we're building a computer, a machine you want to program, input data, output results. And combining the two is extremely difficult. So the first generation of prototypes were just kind of saying, well, here are the quantum bits. They're imperfect. They make errors. But we can still play with them, start to think about how we could use them, and have hope to find usages. But as the end users started looking more and more into those machines, they realized, well, it really needs to be more powerful and less noisy, make fewer errors. And so now for the last 12 to 18 months have been really a tipping point in the whole community. There have been breakthroughs across the board in several modalities. We can mention that there is many different types of quantum computers, and across all those modalities, people started to do what we call quantum error correction, which is to handle correct for errors as they come, as they go. And so now the path is clear, the path forward. Every roadmap from every hardware vendors converges around the same timeline, which is about 2030. So it's not yet today, but it's really not far down the road. And since it's an exponential in computing power, you have to think as if you zoom out on an exponential, it's dead flat, and then it's a vertical wall. So we're at the beginning of the inflection, and the vertical part is coming very fast.
2030 is not that far, yeah. Alice, talk to us about the early wins, to the point of they're already here, and we hear a lot about optimization, but are there some examples you can give where you're seeing value already, even though the qubits aren't at scale and the errors are being figured out?
Yeah, definitely. Optimization is more like a second generation kind of application that we think. The very first application we see with those machines that will be available in like 2030, 2035 is more material design, quantum chemistry. Why? Because you have systems that intrinsically obey the law of quantum mechanics. So one of the key questions, for instance, that we have in material design is what we call high temperature superconductors. So a superconductor is a type of material when you have a current that flows through it, the electrons basically they behave all coherently, and you don't have any loss, any energy that goes out. So you know when you plug your laptop, sometimes it heats up either your laptop or your charger. It's because electrons are just bumping into one another. You have just heat that goes out, loss, those kind of things. In a superconductor, basically you don't have that at all. You just have all electrons flowing around perfectly, knowing where others are. Of course, it's a pure quantum mechanical state. And these kind of things, they have been around experimentally for more than 40 years now. But from a theoretical point of view, we still don't understand why they behave like that. It's still a puzzle. I spent a part of my PhD on this. And it's because fundamentally it's a quantum mechanical problem where all electrons, they just strongly see each other. And it's the kind of, we call a many-body problem. It's kind of like when you have stars in galaxies, neurons in your brains, when you have droplets in water. It's a lot of molecules. They're all interconnected to each other. It's a super complicated problem. It's what we call an exponential problem, actually. And for those types of problems, we expect to see by 2030 the first applications, because then we will really be able to harness the power of quantum computing to be able to represent those systems and be able to solve those changes that have been around. And when you're a scientist, like those kind of problems that are really hard to solve, and we want to have first discoveries on. And of course, so this is more what we call like material design, condensed matter physics, if you're in the field. And the second thing is more quantum chemistry, and on this I will be very brief, but basically helping quantum chemists design new molecules, new drugs, understand the fundamental properties of these molecules will come just right after. So it's more material design and then quantum chemistry that we expect.
And Joseph, maybe are you seeing some practical applications? I listened to Alice and I think about what you're doing. Is nuclear simulation or some of these areas more prone to look at from a quantum computing? Or give some examples.
Yeah. So I totally agree. I think that the first application will be on material science. For a company like us, it can have an impact to understand how, for example, PV pans behave with time, how battery behave with time, which is not well understood right now. When we buy a battery, we don't know what would be the yield in 10 or 20 years. So it's hard for us. It could be an opportunity for our business, and at the end of the journey, of course, optimization. Because as a utility company, we have a lot of optimization problem that we can't solve exactly right now today. Even with AI, we can't solve a massive optimization problem right now. Even if, of course, on the classical algorithm are progressing very fast. And if I just go back to your first question, what is a qubit for us?
Sure.
I won't explain what is a qubit, but for us, a qubit means that we have to reinvent hundreds of codes that we developed since the 80s, since the 80s actually. So you don't have an automatic translation between a classical code and a quantum code. So you have to reinvent everything. So in terms of your business, a qubit means a huge investment in terms of redesigning stuff, reinventing new usages, and so on and so forth. So yeah, if I go back to the use case, definitely material science first to eat at the table of quantum, and at the end for the dessert optimization.
So it could transform your industry if you rethink how you're building batteries, solar panels, everything, and then optimizing it differently. Do you see that disruption?
For us, it won't be existential, but it will bring a lot of value. I think that for some companies, like pharma companies, it can be existential. Yeah, it can change the business.
As well in automotive, we're seeing a lot of momentum around automotive, which was initially surprising to me. But when you think about it, the one that will design the future of batteries can reshuffle completely the stakes in automotive. And that's just one in many. We're also seeing a lot of effort by governments. 2025 is definitely a very weird year. And so quantum is becoming more and more strategic, also because we did not mention it maybe as of pudeur, but it's a machine that will be able to break quite a few codes, And so our role is also to make sure that Europe is not the only one not having this capacity.
So I was going to ask about industries. Is it every industry? Are you seeing kind of use cases more, what I'd say functional, like optimization that applies across every industry? Or are you seeing specific industry use cases like we see in electric, material science? And how do you design a computer for that, right? Is it a general purpose at the end of the day?
Yeah, so it's a general purpose, but not all problems are born equal when it comes to quantum. I often say that trying to do a multiplication with a quantum computer is just like trying to cut butter with a lightsaber. It's not just overkill, it's highly inefficient. And so you have to think a bit more. But at the same time, when you go back in history and you look at the 40s, at the early days of computing, you had this famous quote by the CEO of IBM at the time, which is, there is maybe a world market for 4 computers in the world.
Got that one wrong.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of feels how what is the current state of quantum. We're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. Only people coming from deep science have been tinkering around with the idea of a quantum computer. But as soon as the machines are really here and delivering the first use cases, many more people will start to think, hey, how can I leverage this tremendous power for my specific problem? And this can open completely new ways of addressing things that were out of reach, unthinkable previously.
Yeah, and maybe to think about it, think about GPUs. You know, when they were developed, it was more like for graphical use cases,
My gaming computer.
gaming use
course.
cases, and then AI came around, and now NVIDIA really has really boomed thanks to that. So it's really right now, like it's really coming out of the woods, a bit like AI came out of the woods like 10 years ago, and really expect to have new use cases that are developed when it comes around.
And I wanted to ask you something Joseph said, and this is my non-PhD explanation. The math is different. We can't just take classical AI algorithms and run them in quantum. And I got to show you something. My team has a Gen AI that will do that. But talk to us about that challenge, because I worry about the workforce ahead. There's not a ton of PhDs like you that everyone can hire. But can you walk us through the algorithmic thinking that quantum we have to think about?
Yes, definitely. It's a whole new way of thinking about the algorithm. And the hard part is that our whole world is classical. So quantum mechanics is highly unintuitive. You know, every time you think, oh yeah, the electrons they're going to behave like that, like it's going to happen like that. It's like just doesn't. As you said, you know, you have teleportation, you have coherence, you have things that happen that are really you have to rewire your brain to understand those algorithms. And indeed, as you said, we really will need a lot of talents in the coming years in the deep tech startups that are building the quantum computers, but also in companies like EDF that we will see to have those first use cases to be developed, because it's really a new way to think about the world, which is really fun actually if you like
translation
science.
from theory to practical, is that something you guys are working
on? Yeah, definitely. It's a big. I think one of the biggest challenge, because it's a brand new technology. It changes everything, but it will come with a lot of new usages. And if you don't understand both your business and quantum computing, you won't get these new usages, and you won't imagine the future of it. So as a company, we push hard to train people in-house, and it's hard. But if you don't do that, you won't get the new opportunities from the technology. Today, of course, we are just comparing classical computing with quantum computing in a very basic way. But quantum will come with its new usage, and you have to imagine that, which is not an easy task. I trained people to AI a couple of years ago. It took us a couple of months to do that. For quantum, it takes 2 years to train a PhD in maths.
Right.
So it's longer. It's a longer journey.
So we've been talking about quantum computing. The other topic I just want to cover briefly is post-quantum cryptography. So I think in my world with PwC, this is the event that's actually triggering the conversations with clients. When I first approached them on quantum computing, hard to understand, we don't need it. But when you talk to them about security and kind of that time frame seems to have shifted. I know the NSA in the US has brought it from 2035 to 2030 on certain systems. Are you seeing more momentum that it might be here sooner than we think, in the sense of quantum being an attack vector for encryption? So you have thoughts?
Yeah, we're unfortunately we're the expert bad guys here. So we're building a machine that will be quite efficient at breaking quite a few codes. But that's not the sole purpose. I mean, I think the way it's going to change the world is really through making chemistry and biology exact sciences and let us play on the same ground as nature. Now, when you look at the current type of encryption, RSA for internet, elliptic curve for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, well, yeah, the timeline is definitely around 2030, 2032. So yeah, within those range, and we'll be releasing a paper in 6 months or so that keeps bringing this forward, just because we're doing our part properly of designing better quantum computers. But yeah, it's coming very fast. It's absolutely not. I mean, we're not breaking the internet. We're just strongly asking them to update their protocols.
And do you have confidence in the NIST standards, at least the 4 that have
yeah,
been published?
the main issue in cryptography is the fact that you never have a proof of the inexistence of an attack. The only
Until it's too late.
Yeah, and the only confidence you have is that a lot of people have tried to break that code for a long time and no one's managed. This is the security you have in cryptography. Now the problem is that we're asking them to change very rapidly to new standards that are pushed by the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies, but those are very fresh, and so who knows, maybe we'll find ways to break them. I'm confident that there are algorithms out there that will be robust to quantum computers. Again, quantum computers are extremely powerful, but they are not magical machines. They have a limited reach, which would change the world, but not break NP hard problems. At least that's
so there's the math challenge of finding new algorithms. But there's also an enterprise challenge. As you think about your enterprise, it's mission critical, providing electricity. Are you starting to think about PQC and how you remediate systems, obviously critical systems?
Yeah, definitely, because of course we didn't see that close until the last couple of years, as Theo said. We saw a lot of successes, a lot of progresses during the last 2 years. So of course we can't miss the train. We have to adapt ourselves. We are a big company. If a revolution occurs, we have to adapt to be ready. But for a company like us, changing the encryption algorithm is not an easy task. On top of that, post-quantum cryptography algorithms are not well stabilized because some of them has been cracked.
They're also slower. And if you think about your system,
they are slower, they are heavier. We were living in a quite comfortable world with the RSA algorithms, but we have to change that. And we have to adapt, we have to be agile, develop our crypto agility, because we can't be sure that the encryption algorithm that are proposed by NIST won't be cracked in the next years. And we saw some example of that within 2023, I think. So we have to be crypto agile, meaning that we have to be ready to change the algorithm from a day to another.
It's a very different pattern than we've lived in for 40 years. Yeah. And we're also seeing early indications that quantum optimization is an attack vector even today on smaller sets of encryption. So I believe this is an issue everyone should be thinking about.
But it's not brand new. I mean, when you think about history of classical computers, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the Imitation Game about Alan Turing. I mean, we're just providing computing machines, and so they're good at maths. And some of the math
We didn't break it. We just provided the machine.
Well, I mean, if it's feasible, it's going to be done. And we know some parts of the world are really not waiting for our approval. So we'd rather play on the same foot.
Excellent. So audience, now is your opportunity to tap into these brilliant minds. Any questions for our panel here? Yes, quick one. All right.
Thank you very much. I just have one question about the applications. You were talking about a lot of applications. How do you manage to do these applications? Because for me, quantum is a little bit conceptual. So to have, I don't know, clients, companies, how do you manage to do that?
Don't say that. Don't say it's science fiction, because we used to say that.
Fundamental R&D for me. So to have the applications maybe
Yeah, so
a little bit complicated.
how are you bringing it to life?
Yeah, it's a good question. And honestly, within my company, I have in my scientific board a Nobel Prize who used to say that we would never have 100 qubits, even noisy qubits. So it's changing. So we managed now to do some tests on noisy machine. It doesn't compete with classical algorithm. So yeah, it's more than conceptual because we managed now to do some tests at a lower scale. So we have to do some POCs and we have to extrapolate. As a company, if you do some POCs, it tends to make your management believe that it's not science fiction anymore. But as you say, it's really in the early stages. But we know that we can do some extrapolation, and if these extrapolation are real, if they are true, it can change the business, and that's our day-to-day job. Maybe I can.
And I was going to say, maybe describe how you access the computer through the cloud, just like we do other computing. But any thoughts there?
Yeah, so I mean, you can access quantum computers today. Again, they're here, they're just not yet more powerful than your smartphone. And so you can access our Boson 4 chip through Google Cloud, for example, or some of our competitors, or use emulators locally on your laptop or smartphone, depending on the number of qubits. And I guess at least that's kind of how you benchmark.
Yes, and also to answer your question, it's like when you have a definite problem that you want to solve. I know you're like the SNCF and you want all your trains to arrive on time and you want to optimize your railway. You have your problem, and then when you put it on a computer, any kind of computer, you have to specify how you're going to put it in your computer. What's the actual problem, what you want the computer to solve. And actually, when you're looking at the classical and quantum computers, it's like two different ways of framing the problem. So right now we're in the stage of we're looking at what kinds of problems can we frame and what kinds of problems do we expect to have the most impact on. And indeed, as we discussed, it's going to be, not just, it won't happen overnight, but it will be a transition with first problems that are well identified, because we see they're pretty similar to the machine we're building, where they're cousins. So we're like, okay, we can access those, like how to frame the problem is easy. And then the further you go to optimization problem, you go to this like SNCF problem we're talking about, then it will take more time, but it's like, it's happening, and researchers are coming up with new ideas like every day, and it's very exciting.
Another question?
Thank you very much. Talking about framing the problem, for example, now if I have a problem on physics, on chemistry, I need to find a physicist or chemist. But like, is there any, or will there be like a playground or like some simple, let's say, knowledges for everyone, like in maybe not everyone, but in research and development. So we try to orient ourselves to know if there is a possibility, or is that something that only like geeks will know?
Yeah, and like the ecosystem is really booming right now. So as you said, Theo, if you look at our chip in the cloud, that right now you can just test that it behaves quantum mechanically. So it's like you really can't do much with it right now, but we are a hardware company and a chip designer company. But actually, if you take the analogy with classical computer, we will have to rebuild all the steps. So, not just building the basic element, but also building how do you apply logical gates on it? How do you make a compiler that will turn your program into instructions that go really on the chip? And then on top of that, how do you design languages, softwares that people like you can really actually use to do, I don't know, like an addition, a multiplication, even though that's not really useful, but really actual applications. And all of this value chain, everyone is moving forward in the ecosystem right now. So it's not just the quantum design, but it also computation, applications, all of that. And everyone is really like across, like, is really achieving great results and have been achieving great results over the past few years. So we really, we are going to get there eventually, and it's going to be a great time.
If I can build on what you just said, Alice, maybe to dare to dream a bit about what's awaitus. Basically, when I tease my chemist friends by saying I want to make chemistry an exact science, what I mean is that tomorrow you'll have tools to design molecules the same way you're designing mechanical stuff on your computers. You have computer-aided design for anything mechanical or electronics. Tomorrow you'll have the same for chemistry and biology. But that let us also envision the interplay between AI and quantum. Basically, AI is really good at guessing what you should try next, interpolating, extrapolating, but it has no idea of the ground truth. The quantum computer is here to not replace the guessing part, but replacing the wet lab part, the part where you check if it's going to work well. And so the kind of workflow you can dream of is really saying, well, I'm looking for a molecule that can, I don't know, inhibit this protein in a virus, whatever. Find me something. The AI is going to say, well, my guess would be this, and then it hands it over to the quantum computer, which checks, says, well, you're slightly off. The AI say, okay, sorry, let me adapt, and you have a very fast cycle that lets you do optimal design between something that is really good at interpolating and averaging, learning from the data sets, and something that is really good at mimicking nature.
I think this is a great way to end. The future is AI, classical, and quantum coming together, working together to solve these hard problems. So panel, thank you so much. I thought that was an amazing
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant minds.